In the summer of 1940, Hermann Göring flew to the Pas de Calais and asked his top flight commanders what they needed to finish off the RAF. One of them answered with a single request: a squadron of Spitfires. The remark ended the meeting and started a feud. The pilot who said it was Adolf Galland, and Göring would spend the next 5 years trying to destroy him. Adolf Galland was born on March 19, 1912 in Westerholt, a coal mining town in Westphalia. As a teenager, he was drawn to gliding, and by 1932 he was enrolled at the Lufthansa Commercial Flight School. Further training at an aerobatic school in Würzburg gave him a full pilot's license at a time when Germany was still officially prohibited from maintaining a military air force. His first combat came in Spain. During 1937, Galland flew approximately 187 ground attack sorties with the Condor Legion during the Spanish Civil War, piloting the Heinkel HE-51 biplane in support of Franco's nationalist forces. He encountered no aerial combat against opposing fighters but returned to Germany with detailed tactical observations on close air support. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, Galland was back in a ground attack role, flying the Henschel HS-123. He lobbied his superiors persistently for a transfer to single-seat fighters. By early 1940, the posting came through. He joined Jägerschwader 27 for the campaign in France, flew the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and recorded his first aerial victories that May. The Battle of Britain made him a national figure. Flying with his fighter wing from the Pas de Calais, Galland accumulated 57 confirmed kills between July and October 1940, engaging RAF formations over southeast England. His approach was systematic. He flew at the edge of the Bf-109's fuel range rather than break off early, analysed British formation tactics between sorties, and held careful debriefs after each engagement. In September 1940, he received the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, among the first Luftwaffe pilots to hold that decoration. His photograph appeared on recruitment posters across Germany. Since his days in Spain, Galland had flown with a personal emblem painted beneath his cockpit, a cigar-smoking Mickey Mouse wielding a hatchet. He had also had his oxygen mask modified to include a holder for a lit cigar. When Göring asked his pilots whether they had considered shooting at enemy pilots descending in parachutes, Galland told him he would consider it murder and would do everything in his power to disobey such an order. The exchange most associated with his name came that August. Göring visited the Pas de Calais and asked his commanders what they needed to defeat the RAF. Galland reportedly answered with a single request: a squadron of Spitfires. The remark was intended to illustrate how capable the British fighters were. Göring reportedly left the meeting furious. The story spread quickly through the officer corps and became one of the most repeated anecdotes of the air war. In November 1941, Galland was appointed General der Jagdflieger, commander of the entire Luftwaffe fighter arm, responsible for the training and operational doctrine of every fighter pilot Germany had. A year later, in November 1942, his promotion to General Major made him the youngest general in the history of the German military. He was about to discover that his most dangerous opponents were not flying for the RAF. As General der Jagdflieger, Galland assumed formal responsibility for pilot training, procurement, and fighter doctrine across the entire Luftwaffe. He never stopped flying. Standing orders prohibited senior commanders from combat missions, but Galland flew regardless. The rules that applied to administrators did not, in his view, apply to him. By the end of the war, his personal victory total reached 104 confirmed kills, all on the Western Front. He held Germany's most senior fighter command and remained one of its most active combat pilots at the same time. However, his tenure brought sustained conflict with Göring. Following heavy bomber losses over England in 1941 and 42, Göring publicly accused the fighter pilots of cowardice and deliberate failure to protect the bombers. Galland refused the characterization. In formal briefings, he argued that the Bf-109's operational range made close escort physically impossible over certain distances, and that insisting on it produced preventable casualties. His position was technically sound. The argument resolved nothing except producing lasting personal animosity between the two men. But the biggest fight of his career had nothing to do with the RAF. It was about a single aircraft, the Me-262. Germany's first jet had flown under its own power on July 18, 1942. By late 1943, Galland had test-flown a prototype and reported to Göring and Hitler that it outclassed anything the Allies possessed. He urged its immediate deployment as a high-speed interceptor against Allied bomber formations striking German industry. Hitler refused, insisting Germany needed an offensive weapon ahead of the anticipated Allied landing in France. He directed the Me-262 to be produced primarily as a fast bomber. Galland argued this surrendered the aircraft's most decisive advantage. The jet entered limited bomber service in 1944, delaying fighter deployment by critical months. By autumn 1944, several senior fighter commanders shared Galland's frustration. Germany's air defenses were deteriorating sharply, Allied bombers were reaching German cities in daylight, and Göring continued assigning blame to individual pilots rather than reconsidering strategy. In November 1944, Galland joined a group of decorated officers in submitting a formal written memorandum to Göring criticizing the management of the air war. The document, later referred to informally as the Mutiny of the Aces, was pointed and direct in its assessment of Luftwaffe leadership failures. Göring summoned the signatories and threatened court-martial proceedings. No formal charges followed, but the consequences were immediate. In January 1945, Galland was relieved of his command as General der Jagdflieger. He was offered a choice between retirement and a front-line posting at the head of a new Me-262 unit. What he did next was not what Göring had expected. Göring handed him what was meant to be a punishment. Galland took it as an opportunity. Within weeks, he was assembling Jagdverband 44, JV-44, a unit of Me-262 jets based initially at Brandenburg-Brest before relocating to Munich. The posting was designed to remove him from the political landscape. He treated it as a combat assignment. JV-44 attracted the most experienced, sidelined pilots in the Luftwaffe. Galland recruited from men who had signed the November 1944 memorandum or otherwise fallen out with high command. Johannes Steinhoff, Günther Lutzow, Gerhard Barkhorn and Walter Krupinski were among those who joined, carrying hundreds of aerial victories between them. Officers referred to the unit informally as the squadron of experts. Most had been removed from senior positions for the same reasons Galland had been. JV-44 flew its first operations in March 1945. Conditions were difficult from the start. Allied air forces attacked German airfields continuously, fuel supplies were erratic, and the Me-262 required careful handling. Its Jumo 004 turbojet engines were prone to flame out if the throttle was advanced too sharply, and the aircraft's longer acceleration phase left it exposed during takeoff and landing. Allied fighter pilots adapted quickly, positioning above German jet fields to attack the Me-262s on final approach when it fell to its lowest speed, a tactic documented in US 8th Air Force reports from the period. Despite these pressures, the unit achieved results. Operating from Munich-Riem, JV-44 targeted American bomber formations over Bavaria using R-4M rockets in high-speed passes against B-26 Marauders before Allied escorts could respond. Surviving records credit the unit with approximately 47 aerial victories during its operational period. The Me-262 was faster than anything the Allies could put in the air, but by April 1945, Germany was running out of fuel, airfields, and time. Galland continued to fly throughout, leading missions and adding to his personal victory total as the situation on the ground collapsed around the unit. On April 26, 1945, his Me-262 was hit in combat over Munich and he was wounded. He was shot down by a P-47 Thunderbolt and crash-landed at Munich-Riem with a wounded knee. American troops were within days of the airfield. He discharged himself from hospital and made his way to Tegernsee. On May 1st, Galland drafted a note to General Eisenhower requesting a separate surrender for JV-44. 2 aides flew across the lines in a Fiesler Stork and returned with instructions. The remaining Me-262s were blown up on the ground before American troops arrived. JV-44 disbanded within days as Allied forces closed in on Munich. The war was, for all practical purposes, over. He would not stay in Germany for long. Galland surrendered to American forces near Salzburg in May 1945. The officers who processed him knew exactly who he was. Within days, British and American interrogators were competing for access to the man who had commanded Germany's fighter arm and then its most advanced jet unit. He spent the following months being questioned on Me-262 tactics, propulsion systems, and the decisions that had shaped the air war. He was released on April 28, 1947, and returned to a Germany that had no official interest in celebrating him. He found work as a forester on an estate in northern Germany. His first assignment back in aviation came shortly after, lecturing on fighter tactics for the RAF, the same force he had spent 4 years trying to destroy. That changed in the summer of 1948 when Kurt Tank, the designer of the Focke-Wulf FW-190, contacted him with a proposal. Perron's government was recruiting German aviation experts to build an indigenous combat aircraft industry, and Tank wanted Galland on his team. In mid-October 1948, Galland sailed from Genoa, arriving in Buenos Aires the following month. He served as a consultant to the Argentine Air Force, the Fuerza Aérea Argentina, advising on jet aviation development and pilot training. He remained until 1955, when political upheaval following Perón's removal from power ended the arrangement and brought him back to West Germany. While still in Argentina, he published his memoir, Die Ersten und die Letzten, the first and last in English. It appeared in 1953 and became a bestseller in 14 languages, selling 3 million copies worldwide. Its operational detail was authoritative and widely praised by the RAF and USAAF as a frank account of the air war. Back in Germany, he was approached by a commissioner for Chancellor Adenauer about joining the new Bundeswehr. The proposal came to nothing when France blocked the wider European defense framework it depended on. Instead, in 1957, Galland opened his own aviation consultancy in Bonn and continued to fly at air shows. In 1969, he served as a technical advisor on the film Battle of Britain, working alongside his former adversary, Robert Stanford Tuck. He appeared on screen the following year in the British documentary series The World at War. He died on February 9, 1966 in Remagen, Oberwinter, aged 83. Still flying until late in life, still arguing about the air war, and still impossible to ignore. If you found this video insightful, watch What Happened to Luftwaffe Planes After World War II next. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history inside. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.